Alright, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to be doing a different video today, actually a little something on heating systems. I know quite a bit of knowledge when it comes down to heating systems, especially the single pipe steam heating system. As you can see in the background, I'm currently sitting in front of my living room radiator. And if you take a look at it, you see it's a very exclusive design. It's a cast iron radiator, of course, and well, me, I prefer cast iron. They're the best radiators you can use. They give you the most heat, the maximum amount of BTUs, regardless of whatever system that you use, whether it be hot water or steam. But I currently have a steam heating system, and I like exclusive stuff when it comes down to that. I don't go for baseboard, and it's just never been me. Baseboard are just a cheap design, and they really don't have a lot of durability. In this case, this radiator is probably close to 100 years old, and it's still in action. It's still running. As a matter of fact, this is not even made anymore. I'm going to give you a quick look at the radiator itself. If you take a look at this type of radiator, this is specifically a steam radiator. This cannot work on any other type of heating system other than hot water. And I'll explain to you exactly why. If you see exactly where I'm pointing at right here, you see the top of it, how the sections, they basically have these little pieces that bring them together. Now if you take a close look at this, no water or steam actually passes through there. This is only just a connection to hold the sections together. Now take a look at the bottom of the radiator, and you can see it has actually a column where push nipples, not even push nipples, these are actually threaded nipples that screw this radiator together. I guess they must have done it with a certain type of tool years ago when they designed this radiator. In some cases you have radiators with push nipples that you can take them apart. In this case, this radiator cannot be taken apart once it's been put together and been in operation and service for so many years the way it has been. And as you can see, the common thing that you would see on the common radiators now, which are universal cast iron radiators and also a lot smaller, is that they have a plug on the bottom of the radiator as well as the top. But if you take a look, there's no plug. Okay, don't let this fool you. This is just a rod that connects or basically keeps these sections together. If I can get a closer look at that, well, you can see it somewhat in there. I never took the time to paint that. You can take a good look at the air valves that I use, which is a Hoffman air valve, which actually, these air valves are best known for venting the radiator and getting all the air out. And you can actually hear it running in the background. Another valve that I do use are Gordon's valves. These are actually, it seems like over the years people have designed plumbing parts to be very cheap. So I'll go for Gordon's or Hoffman, but unfortunately Hoffman are not made the same way they used to, so now they pretty much seem to break down a lot. On a lot of cases, what you'll get with Hoffman air valves is that it'll vent the radiator out properly, but in some cases it'll never shut off. So throughout the entire time that the steam cycle is running, you'll just hear consistent hissing throughout the radiator. Now you do hear hissing out of my radiator here, but this is only because it's still heating up. Like right now I only got about 3.5 sections heated up, so it's just now making its way to the 4th one. So basically once it gets to this section here and the steam finally makes its way to the vent, basically you won't hear any more hissing. It'll pretty much quiet down. Now a common problem that happens with a lot of steam systems is that you get a lot of excessive banging. Now with my radiator, you pretty much don't get that. You do get a little bit of sound like what you get now, but pretty much it'll all die down, but I never hear knocking out of the system. A lot of problems what goes on in a heating system, why you get a lot of knocking, and let me show you why. If you take a look, excuse my setup here, but if you take a look at this device here, basically on a one pipe system, this is a cutoff valve, okay? Now with this cutoff valve, a common area where people go wrong is that they feel that they can regulate the radiator, but you cannot do that with a one pipe system. The cutoff valve only serves one purpose and one purpose only, for shutting the radiator off. And you only should shut the radiator off in times of emergencies or when the radiator is being serviced and you want to try to service it while the heating system is currently on, which is not a recommended thing, but if you're skilled like I am, you can do it. Nevertheless, let me show you exactly what happens when you leave this valve partially open. Right now I got it completely closed, okay? And as you see, there's a lip or a seat that basically comes down. Let me open this up for you right now. Now, if you take a look, it opens up. Now, the one thing to understand about a one-pipe steam heating system is that the same area where the steam comes up. Now, this is an 1.25 inch valve, so you have steam coming up in a pipe that's running throughout the system, and it's putting in steam inside of the radiator. But now that very same condensated water also makes its way back through that same valve. So if you have this thing partially open, what you'll wind up doing, and excuse me, but you can actually hear that the final section is starting to heat up. Now, as you hear, as I told you before, you would eventually hear the valve quiet down. And this is pretty much a good sign. This means that it's pretty much venting out whatever leftovers air is still inside of there. Now, back to what I was saying. If you leave this valve partially open, what eventually winds up happening is that the same water that is trying to escape winds up getting locked in between the radiator and the valve. In some cases, you'll get water spitting out of the air valve, which is something that you don't want. In a lot of cases, you'll get water leaking out of this here, out of the nut. And basically, when you adjust this constantly, it leaks, or it'll basically loosen the packing that's inside of the valve that keeps it from leaking. So I don't recommend that you adjust them by any means necessary. If you do get a little hot, it's best to just open up a window so that way you can stay as comfortable as you'd like to be. Now, if you live in a house, you're probably better off, and you control your own heat, by the way, you're probably better off just regulating your thermostat or lowering it down. Now, another thing that I want to bring to your attention are these here, and which is actually radiators that are very exclusive, and I don't know why companies don't make radiators like this anymore. Now, if you take a look at this radiator, and I'm standing a couple of feet away from here, and I can feel the heat coming. Now, this is a cast iron panel radiator. Now, many companies make radiators similar like this, made out of steel, that are strictly for hot water or closed systems. But this radiator does both systems. And as you take a look inside of it, you can see that there is a cast iron convector that somewhat even looks like a typical cast iron element. Now, for those of you who don't know what a cast iron element is, that is one of these radiators right here. Either this one, which is the original cast iron element, or the modern cast iron element, which you see right here. And pretty much what you get out of this radiator is radiant heat. You get basically two different forms of heat out of this radiator. You get the convectional heat, which is what you see out of this device behind it, or in between these panels, and then you get the radiant heat. And as a matter of fact, it is a very effective heat, because as a matter of fact, just standing right in front of this thing, it is hot as hell, and this room gets very hot with this radiator. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to keep this radiator in this room. Now, I do have a few more of these, and unfortunately these, I don't even know if they're no longer made. You can see I got an 1.25 inch cutoff valve running into the radiator. The panel, you can see the fins from the convector in between the panel, and the panel is hot as hell. Now, when I paint these radiators, I use aluminum, Rust-Oleum high temperature paint. And you can see I use a Gordon's valve for this radiator, which you barely can hear. And if you take a closer look, if you look at my cutoff valves, you can see that there's no leaks, there's no water. Now, whenever I install my cutoff valves, I always pack them with a little bit of Teflon in between the valve and the union itself and the nipple. That way, to better yet, furthermore, seal the leaks. And I always use Teflon tapes when it comes down to installing any plumbing device, especially when it comes down to heating. Because why? I know if you use Teflon tape, you have an easier chance of being able to back out the valve or the pipe or whatever might cause a problem if something were to give problems in case of an emergency. Now, remind you, whenever you're dealing with something like a radiator, you're talking about a piece of cast iron that weighs several hundred pounds in some cases. And if you take a closer look, I do have another one of these radiators. Now, these, like I said, these are not made. So these pretty much I bought, and I think I got an idea of where I want to install this radiator at. This is not hooked up. This is just a radiator that I'm still working on. Actually, I had it hooked up in this room and I had to disconnect it because it was too warm. As you take a look, this has two convector fins inside of it, which actually makes this give off a very effective heat. You have no complaints about the heat when you get it. But no, nevertheless, like I said, I don't understand why they would stop building these radiators. These radiators can be put inside of a wall depending on the design. And one other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention, the next thing when it comes down to a one-pipe steam system, if you take a close look at that, you can see that I have washers underneath the legs of the radiator. And this is the better yet pitch. So the condensated water that builds up from the steam will make its way down and back to the cutoff valve, where it basically will make its way back into the boiler. And if you take a look, you can see that my valves are all the way open. I never leave them partially open or adjust them. I always keep them all the way open. The less they're tampered with, the better off they are. And I'm going to show, actually, while I'm doing this little video, I might as well show you two other of my radiators that I use. My bathroom radiator, which this color is hot as hell. If you take a look, I mentioned the cast iron element. This is another form of a cast iron convector, which these are no longer made, unfortunately. This is a system that I did basically from scratch, and it's very effective. Now, this little radiator here gives me enough heat. Another important thing that I want people to take a look at, when it comes down to the installation when you're working on a radiator that's on a one-pipe heating system, if you take a look and you see where I have my air valve located at. Now, also take a look at the legs. This is a valve that I took out because it's no good. You take a look at the legs and you see that I have washers underneath the stilts and a piece of wood propped underneath this. I also have a piece of wood propped on this side as well, but I do not have the washers. I have the washers on this side. Why? To pitch that condensated water back down into the cutoff valve, back to the return line and back to the boiler. But I wanted you to pay attention to the way I have this thing set up, because you can see that I have the air valve set up on the lowest portion of the radiator. Whenever it comes down to doing an installation of a radiator for a steam system, especially the one pipe system, you want to make sure that that air valve is as low as you possibly can get it, because you got to remember steam rises. So as that steam rises, basically if you have the air valve set up at the top, which there's a slot where I plugged up, because basically the radiator will not heat up as sufficiently. Basically you will be getting heat at the top of the radiator, but the bottom section of the radiator wouldn't be heating up properly. So I cut out this plug with a sawzall and put this elbow in and this bushing and put in this Gordon's valve. And this is also a number 4 Gordon's valve, which the opening is very small. And one other thing I wanted to show you, I'm going to show you my bedroom radiator, which is, like I said, I keep very exclusive radiators in my home. You can take a look at this one here. All of these radiators are on, by the way, and you can't even notice it because I set up the system so good. Okay. Now you can hear my bedroom radiator is letting off a little steam. It's a slightly larger radiator than the other ones, and it heats up just a little different. So if you take a look, once again, like I said, I use very rare exclusive radiators. I don't pick out any, or usually I go to plumbing supply stores that refurbish old radiators and I get them for a cheap deal and I fix them myself and put them into the system. So let me try to get this cover off so I can give a better description. Give me 1 second, I'm going to plant the camera down. Okay. This is another rare exclusive radiator. This is a very wide radiator, very low to the ground, but it is extremely wide. It is about 13 inches from end to end. When I mean end to end, 13 inches deep. So it's a relatively larger radiator, and these weigh a ton. But they give off very, very, very good heat. And as you see, in between the sections, it has fins in between, which actually give off more heat than what most radiators or what your normal radiator would do these days. A lot of people get the little cheap cast iron radiators that you get at the hardware store. Now they're nice, but they don't work the same way that these would work. And if you take a look once again, you see I have washers at the bottom of the legs and the back legs and the back end legs of the radiator. Why? Because this is a one pipe system, and I want to always make sure that my water returns back into the cutoff valve, back to the return line, and back into the boiler. Once again, if you take a look, the valves that I use are of the pot belly type, which are usually better valves to use on the radiator, so don't go for the cheap ones because you get cheap results. And if you take a look, they're all the way open. So I think that pretty much concludes this video. I'm in total darkness right now. Okay. Get my camera to focus out. Okay, so that pretty much concludes this video. If anyone has questions on when it comes down to one pipe steam heating systems, or if I can be any type of assistance, you can always feel free to leave comments and messages, because I have quite a bit of knowledge on this topic right here, and I'm gonna be doing a few more videos off of boilers and things like that. So if you've watched my channel before, then you realize my channel is in the defense of those who think logic and those who make sense. This is HKABID TV.